NTV Wild Talk in partnership with the Kenya Wildlife Service and Wildlife Direct.
Hello and welcome to NTV Wild Talk with me, Smriti Vidyarthi. So you must hear plenty of noise. Where am I today? Well, on my right is Kipande Road, and then behind me is the Globe Cinema roundabout, and on my left is part of the Nairobi River. And this is why we're here. In Africa, the belief is that when it rains, it's a blessing. But in many parts of the country, when the heavens open up, it's often disastrous. Collapsed buildings resulting in the loss of lives and property, extensive and dangerous flooding, and waterlogged areas are just some of what's experienced when it rains. While heavy rainfall and poor drainage is partly to blame for the damage, many fail to realize that in fact it is the very construction of buildings on river banks that cause the excessive flooding, as well as the interference with the river's natural course and the misuse of land close to the river's edge. This area of land along a watercourse is known as a riparian zone and should be used sensitively. There are many riparian zones across the country, and the area in between Nairobi's Kijabe Street on the left and Kipande Road on the right is one example, as it lies adjacent to the Nairobi River. It is a riparian zone that was once misused, but has now been restored. So I'm venturing deeper into this area now that's in between Kipande Road, Globe Cinema and also Nairobi River, because of course we're talking about riparian land, and this is where the environmentalist Isaac Kalua asked me to meet him to discuss the issue. Hi Isaac, good to meet you. Is this a bamboo? Just before we actually start, I'm very surprised to find you here.
Very interesting. One of the best places in the city that sometimes I just want to see, and I wish that Kenyans can never understand when we talk about environment, what it is all about, because seeing is believing.
Yeah.
And therefore this is a reason. This is a bamboo planted just the other day. If you remember when this place was occupied by different people doing different stuff, polluting the river, it's now different, and trees are nurturing so well.
This really is beautiful, and I've got to say, you know, I drive by Kipande Road every single day.
Wow.
And whenever I look to my left, all I think is, oh, I wonder what's down there, because nobody really explores this area. It's extremely rich and green, and of course the river is down there. Can we just head
Yes.
over and have a look? And then of course you've got bamboo growing, which is pretty amazing. I never have expected that.
You see, Smitty, you're not the only one who thinks that there is nothing good about this place. Very many people don't know this. And it's not only the bamboo. Look at the natural trees that were just recently planted.
Yeah.
Look at how cleaner the city, the river is getting to be.
Okay, I've got to stop you there.
Yes.
Because for me, as I walked down, this doesn't look clean to me at all. It's brown and murky, and then I'm seeing a lot of plastic, bottles and various bits and bobs, people's items thrown around. So how are you defining this as clean?
This is in relation to what the river was just a few years ago. And you get to every river in the city, then it tells you a story, because it comes in colored, out of pollution, out of soil that has been drawn into the river, out of this kind of plastics that you can see around. So it's in relation to what it was a few years ago,
right,
when you couldn't even get to this point where we were. It was a charcoal burning site,
yeah,
and selling site where all the dirt used to get into the river, and you can imagine how bad it was.
Yes.
So it is very clean, and cleaner maybe if we did slightly more.
Wow, so essentially you're saying this area of the Nairobi River where we are here is a restored area, and of course it is riparian land. So let's just walk further, because I'm really curious to check the area out. For the layman who perhaps doesn't know what riparian land is, describe it to us.
Simply put, riparian land is just that space that is next to a river, or next to any water body that is available from a lake to the sea, ocean.
Right. So that means this is riparian
this
land.
is riparian land
Because
this
it is
space.
It is land right next to
the
a
river. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So why is riparian land? Is it also known as a wetland?
It is the same as wetland
Okay.
also.
And
yes.
why is it so important to our environment?
It's very important for our environment because one of the things is that this is the hiding place for animals to take water, the wildlife, depending on where you are. So it's very important. It's also the access for different animal species and plants that are kept there. It's supposed to protect the river so that water that is flowing is safe for drinking and other uses.
Right.
It's got so many needs that the space near the river is so important for all of us as human beings for different uses. The stones that you see there, the plants that stay there, they hold the soil together so that you can be able to protect the soil from being moved into the rivers.
Well, I just want to stop for a moment and just look at this environment because it is extremely lush and extremely green. As I said, it was very surprising to me. But describe what this place looked like a few years ago, because it was completely different, wasn't it?
It was completely different, Smithy. And this was a dumping site for many people. This is a place where a lot of people, the homeless, were staying. They still do, but in a more organized way. There was a lot of loose soil that was around and available, pushed into the river. There was a lot of plastics, and you can see right now, because of the the plastics that are around, the plants that are around, the plastics are sieved away into getting into the river. So it was completely different.
Right.
There was farming that was happening around here and so many bad stuff, but look at what it is today. It's something different.
So how have perhaps the lives of Kenyans and also the city of Nairobi itself benefited from this land being restored?
So many. From the city perspective is completely different. Land value has gone high, if you were to look at it that way.
Yeah.
This is a place that tourists can come in and stay around.
Yeah.
This is a place when you fence it off very well, you can even make it a tourist attraction even further. You can keep animals. This is their natural habitat.
Yeah.
This is a place also the water is protected from the pollution that there was and there is and there can be. This is a place, I mean, it's so enormous that that this place is clean as it is right now, even though there is much more that needs to be done.
Sure.
Yes.
And speaking about more that needs to be done, I notice there is a bit of a stench coming up now from part of the river. I think we need to cross an area, so let's cross that and get to the other side and talk more about pollution. Isaac, talk to me a little bit about pollution when it comes to rivers. What impact is it having?
Look at the way this stench that is here and the plastics, the trash that is there. You were asking the importance of riparian space.
Yes.
If it is well managed like it is, it will do exactly that. It will keep stuff away from being taken into the river and protect it naturally. But we must be able to manage this even before it gets here.
Right, but
and this is where... Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, Isaac. Let me ask you, so what you're saying is the fact that this plastic is here on the bank of the river, it's a good thing and it's protecting the river?
Yes, it is protecting the river, but we should be able, it should never get to this point.
Okay.
The plastics should never get to this point in the first place.
Right.
We should have managed it from our own homesteads by separating and creating businesses out of this kind of stuff, because it can be recycled, it can be used for other entrepreneurial...
But the reason this is good is because if there were people living around here or buildings, that would no doubt be back in the river.
Yes, definitely. And even not only that, but also the roots and everything else, including the soil, would have been thrown into the river, messing up the environment even further on.
So now talk to me about the impact of that. What is the impact of all this pollution being on the river? How does it affect the ecology? And then also, how does it affect the lives of Kenyans? What's the relation?
First of all, we must respect the natural drainage systems. And when it is blocked in any way, be it by construction, which we are messing up in a very big way, then it messes up the downstream flow of the water and can even mess up even further on. The fish, the wildlife around this place is messed up. The natural air that we breathe is also messed up in one way or another. The fish and other stuff that we get from the waters is also getting even more dirt and very negatively affecting our bodies. The cancers that we are having, part of it is part of these kind of drainage systems that we are directing into the rivers, and therefore getting toxics that are dangerous for us to eat. And you see, it's all a big cycle.
It's all connected. So living on riparian land or building has an impact on the city itself, on people's health as well, as you just mentioned, and also on the wildlife around us. But talk to us more about how this affects, say, people's everyday life. What is the importance of not blocking and destroying the root of the water?
Let's start it up. Where does riparian start from? From the hills, from the mountains. There are a lot of people who do a lot of farming around those places. When they do farming into that place, then they allow the water that is taking away the soils. The soils get into the dams. The dams are silted and therefore cannot hold as much water as they should be. Then the water that is supposed to be held in the dams flows downwards and downstream into creating floods that we are experiencing every now and then in the city, and negatively affecting even investments in the country and different places. So it's a negative place all through. But you see, one thing that we need to do, Smithy, is we need to create very interesting activities surrounding those people who own their riparian space. Because riparian space is actually supposed to be no man's land. But according to the law, the person who's near the riparian space is the owner of that particular
and that's
riparian space.
definitely one of the biggest challenges facing riparian space in the country.
And there is law that is surrounding that to know what is the meterage or the space around there. There is a survey act that shows that very well. There is a Water Act of 2002 that stipulates 9 meters. There is MCA, which borrows from the same law of Water Act of 2002, which also stipulates 2 times the size of the river with a minimum of 9 meters. So this space is so important that we must respect it. We must create now activities, because these are challenges and they are new challenges. You cannot just tell people to keep the space empty, but we need to be able even to create activities along these spaces. Imagine even creation of people or associations that are producing charcoal using bamboo that is planted along the rivers, and people come into this kind of systems, working on production of energy, renewable energy, out of small mini hydro systems that can be done, and people can earn money and can learn to respect the riparian space.
Well, how was this riparian space transformed?
It took people who are willing, and I always say that it doesn't take everybody in this country. We must just respect systems and follow through activities. You remember when the Honorable Michuki started this, and then followed by the Honorable Mutula Kilonzo, who said that he wants to swim in this place. God keep their lives, because you see, when they started, and there are good people who are working in this country, Smithy. There are unsung heroes in this nation, people who started protecting the rivers. Nairobi has got only 3 rivers. And there are people and institutions who came forth to protect, to plant trees, like you can see. And today, this is the result. And you can imagine if this was what was done across the nation.
So in your view, what is the biggest challenge? Where is the big problem facing riparian lands? Is it corruption, impunity? Is it a lack of understanding about the importance of protecting this kind of land?
There is clearly the greed. This is the beginning of everything else, say particularly in the city. Of course, greed comes with, of course, what must follow naturally is corruption. And that is only within the cities that we have, not only Nairobi, but also other places. But outside the cities, where the rivers do originate, people just lack awareness. They don't know what they can do. So you find people doing vegetable plantations up to the river front, and therefore they actually don't know whether this is bad for them, and they don't know that activities that they are doing upstream affects people downstream, that they are related to the floods and to the collapse of the buildings that we have in the city, because they are up 500 kilometers away, and therefore it is awareness in some areas.
So ultimately, you mentioned the issue of floods. What you're saying is that when it rains heavily and you see cars floating around across the country because of too much water, it's not only because of poor drainage, but it's because it relates to our rivers. Our rivers' courses are being affected, and that
the rivers' courses are being affected. You find even people and institutions are removing the sand in an unsustainable manner, and therefore water cannot be kept very well. The riparian space is supposed to sieve, is supposed to take the water and let the water percolate slowly into the rivers. So once you affect that, much more water than is expected flows through these places. The natural drainage systems are affected in the cities like Nairobi, of course, which naturally these places wildlife should be here, is affected, and therefore you find people have built up, and you remember even it also has a lot to do with planning, Smithy, because the city was planned for about 1 million people in the 1970s. Today we are 4 million people. So planners need also to wake up and do some of the things forcefully, knowing that it's about the people. Buildings that are on the waterways must be removed. It's not an issue of saying this building is 1 billion shillings and therefore please consider my 1 billion shillings.
And
we are more worth than the billion.
There's examples of that. For example, the building opposite Timor. That has caused a lot of controversy, and no doubt a lot of other areas as well. Isaac, if somebody notices that land is being built on an area that perhaps it shouldn't be, how can they address the situation? Who can they turn to report the matter?
Thank you, and I'm glad you brought out this. One, you can go to NEMA. NEMA has got its representation across the nation in different counties. You can speak to NEMA. You can speak to the survey institutions or survey officers through the Ministry of Lands. You can speak to Kenya Forest Service, the institutions that takes care of the forest. You can come to us, the Kenya Water Towers, and say something is happening. You can deal with even the meteorological department.
Really?
These are people that are concerned about the well-being of these rivers, because it's the source of our well-being and development, and therefore people were, and you need to say it even to your chief that is near you, because you must understand that it affects you. So as long as people do understand these issues, then it starts bringing out a lot of new ways of dealing with things. Matters environment can never be dealt with or be left with Vidyati and Isaac here. It must be dealt with everyone.
And Isaac, if these issues aren't addressed, what does the future look like?
Very gloomy. Very gloomy, because a future of our nation is dependent on our actions that we deal on matters of ecological infrastructure. Infrastructure is not only of the hard stuff, it also includes the biological and ecological structure, and it is as important. You can imagine the struggle that we have for water in our nation, and actually world over. This is not just a challenge for Kenya. Only 1% of fresh water is available for drinking. This is something we must be able to deal with, just like the air issues and pollution.
All right, Isaac, thank you so much. Appreciate your time to explain the importance of this riparian area. And of course, there's so many more spaces as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, this is NTV Wild Talk with me, the environmentalist Isaac Kalua, speaking to me about the importance of protecting riparian lands. Well, he did bring up the fact that the county government and various other institutions are responsible. So after the break, I'll be speaking to the governor of Nairobi. And Isaac also brought up the fact of important planning, and I'll be speaking to an architect as well. But not before we give you the chance to guess on Wild Guess, and here's your opportunity to win a great prize. Why are riparian zones important? Give 3 reasons. Why are riparian zones important? Give 3 reasons. Use the hashtag NTVWild on Twitter or like our NTV Wild Facebook page and post your answer on the timeline. Private messages won't be considered. The first person to answer correctly wins a delicious Sunday brunch for two at the Tribe Hotel's Jiko restaurant. It starts off with a 1-hour power yoga session with the Africa Yoga Project, followed by brunch at the poolside featuring bottomless cocktails, an extended dessert buffet and your favorite jazz tunes. The winner also gets 1 bottle of wine courtesy of Wines of the World and a gift hamper courtesy of Wildlife Direct. Terms and conditions apply. Last week's lucky winner was Kaburu Munene. Welcome back to NTV Wild Talk with me, Smriti Vidyarthi. Now I'm coming to you from the Nairobi City County offices, and before I head in to speak to the governor, here's a reminder of our wild guest question. Why are riparian zones important? Give 3 reasons. Why are riparian zones important? Give 3 reasons. Use the hashtag NTVWild on Twitter or like our NTV Wild Facebook page and post your answer on the timeline. Private messages won't be considered. The first person to answer correctly wins a delicious Sunday brunch for two at the Tribe Hotel's Jiko restaurant. It starts off with a 1-hour power yoga session with the Africa Yoga Project, followed by brunch at the poolside featuring bottomless cocktails, an extended dessert buffet and your favorite jazz tunes. The winner also gets 1 bottle of wine courtesy of Wines of the World and a gift hamper courtesy of Wildlife Direct. Terms and conditions apply. Last week's lucky winner was Kaburu Munene. All right, so now I am inside City Hall with the Governor of Nairobi, that is Evans Kidero. Dr. Kidero, thanks very much for your time. We appreciate it. Now, after the Huruma tragedy, you ordered the revocation of 2,000 title deeds for plots that are on riparian land. You also called for the demolition of several unsafe buildings, and you have said that the building near Timor, which is on riparian land, also needs to be demolished. How much progress are we making with all of these?
Riparian land is defined as the land between the river or a stream and the mainland, and it varies between 30 meters to 10 meters depending on the topography of the land. And normally the beacons are normally very, very clear that no building should be done past the beacons that separates land from the river. And in the case of Huruma, it was clearly a case where the building was on riparian land, and there are several others, and the total is about 2,000. And the issue of revocation of titles of riparian land has not just started with the tragedy in Huruma. We had already identified, which is a total. We have about 500,000 plots in Nairobi, and 2,000 is just about 0.5% of the total land, and you know the rivers, that is Ngong River, Nairobi River, Kiricho Ndogo, Kiricho Kubwa, plus the ones in Gigiri and Gigiri Nyari. So we identified them and said that they should be, where the buildings have not been done, they should not buildings, but where the titles had been given, we are asking for the titles to be revoked. And as you know, I mean, the Constitution gives the mandate of issuance of titles or revocation of titles, especially of public land, to the National Lands Commission. Right. So in cases where there are titles, they have to be revoked because titles have got a sanctity. But in cases where there are no titles, we are actually bringing down the buildings. We brought down two buildings in Huruma. But when we went the following day, we found there were court orders pasted on all of them. And we were told that these are court orders. So yesterday we went to the High Court and actually found out High Court has denied that they've given court orders protecting those buildings on riparian land. Right. So whereas we had stopped, we are now going back to bring them down.
So clearly this really is a challenge for you, but now how are you going to go about it if the court is of course getting involved?
Of course, I mean, we have to, in cases where the court is protecting, we must argue, like on the issue of the one Timol, the one at the junction of Langata Road and Bagathi Road, where we had gone to court, because, I mean, the person has a title, and the accused has got a title. And our initial approval, because riparian land or issues to do with water, they are done by various bodies. Approvals are given by various bodies, because that particular one, an approval had been given by WARMA, the Water Resources Management Authority. It had been given by NEMA, the Environmental Management Authority, and all the other bodies. So when we went back to court last week, actually the court ordered that the other bodies that do give the approvals be enjoined. Right. But what the court did not do is they did not lift the injunction. So the injunction is still on. And we are pushing. We've now even gotten 3 more lawyers to work on, to help her with this. Okay. But what we want is that, yes, there's the law, but the law must be cognizant of the environment.
This is all, though, very reactionary. People died in Huruma. It was a devastating tragedy. We are witnessing so many floods because the river's route is being blocked. What really are you going to do now going forward to ensure that you come up with preventative measures rather than reactionary measures?
Actually, I mean, what we'll do is we'll make sure that no building ever gets built without a proper approval. Because the Huruma building, and we must be very, very clear about this, the Huruma building was never approved. And it's not only the Huruma...
So whose then responsibility is it to have checked that?
The former city council should have checked it. But it's not only the private developers who are guilty. The armed forces wall, the army headquarters wall came down. It killed 4 people. It never had an approval. Yesterday I had a meeting with the Air Force. They have walls which have been built that have no approval. So the government is just as guilty as private developers. Yet we tend to appoint, put at a pointing finger to private developers. So it's the responsibility of every developer, be it government, be it private. I'll even tell you others. I mean, a lot of buildings have been done at the airport without approval.
Well, but who's responsible for this to ensure that it doesn't happen?
Is impunity. Because, I mean, the government doesn't need to be reminded, the army doesn't need to be reminded that they need an approval. Yeah, granted that these are security installations and their drawings have got security implications, but that does not exonerate them from following the law.
What is the cost of having buildings on riparian land when we look at the lives of human beings and also the cost that this is having on the county of Nairobi?
It's a huge cost because the cost per square meter, construction cost is about 40,000. On an average, a set of flats would be 20,000 square meters. So you're talking of 300. Each block, the cost of construction is about 300-400 million. And if you're talking of 200, you're talking several billions. And in cases where they come down, lives are lost. And in cases they have to be brought down, it's further cost. And mind you, this is national economy. This is national wealth that is being wasted. So apart from obviously ensuring that there's compliance with the law, but it's also safeguarding the national wealth.
Talk to me about the future of Nairobi. What are your plans for it? Because there are plans in place to rehabilitate Nairobi River.
We have strengthened our surveillance systems. We've strengthened our inspectorate. So we will see a lot less buildings coming out without approval. This other thing was a lot of people who were building before, especially in the Embakasi area, people who bought land with the land buying companies because they had shared certificates. And we only approve buildings based on title deeds. Yeah. We've reviewed our building laws. We've come with the regularization bill, which now allows us to use the share certificates. And apart from that, some of the buildings that were done before are now being re-examined. When they apply, we go and re-examine them. If they need to be strengthened, the structural integrity needs to be strengthened, we are doing that. And if they're good, we approve them. And if they're no good, we will bring them down. So we are appealing to the people who built before, which is about 40% of the total total buildings in Nairobi. The other thing is that we are working with the Ministry of Land so that people get their titles as fast as they can. So the land buying companies like Sieko, like Githunguri, like Embakasi Ranching, we are ensuring that they are getting their titles now.
And do you think that part of the problem is that perhaps people don't understand the importance of not building on riparian land? Perhaps they don't understand that by building on this kind of land, they are blocking the river's route?
I think, it's just not that they don't understand, it's desperation, it's supply and demand. Land is limited. So land is very valuable. Every square meter of land in Nairobi is very valuable. And previously, because people violated the law and nothing happened to them, they developed an attitude of impunity. And ours is to stop that attitude of impunity. Law and order must be followed.
How are you doing enough to ensure that these buildings don't come up, and if they are up, they come down?
The former city council never did enough, but the county government is doing enough.
And you strongly believe that?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Joining me, the Governor of Nairobi County, that is Dr. Evans Kidero, speaking to me here at City Hall about the issue of constructing on riparian lands. And in just a moment, I'm about to head off now to an architecture firm, and you'll find out why that links to riparian lands. So now I am at Planning House on Lower Kabete Road. It is an architectural firm, and joining me is Mumo Musuba. He is the Managing Director of Planning. Great to have you with us.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, so Mumo, there's a lot of interesting maps and sort of plans behind us that we'll go through in just a moment. But first and foremost, this topic is all about riparian lands and restoring Nairobi River, but what is the connection between an architectural firm and Nairobi River, for example?
We're an architectural and land use planning and project management firm, and we represent a lot of private and public sector clients who come to us with their sites and asking us to look at how we could best come up with ideas for development of those sites. And we've, like most other people in this city, been wondering about the rivers and the riparian areas, because we've got 3 rivers that cut through this city. We feel that those are not well utilized because if you compare Nairobi to other global cities where you've got the same number of rivers, waterfront properties are the most valuable, best utilized properties in the world. Whereas in Nairobi, we've got this sort of situation where you've got garbage that is thrown onto the rivers. You've got recent cases of buildings that have been built on riparian areas collapsing. You've got the flood challenges that we've got with people losing their homes, losing their lives with all of that. Yet we've got a fantastic resource that could be put into good use. So it's something that we've been thinking about as a practice, and thinking about how private sector and how some of our clients who've come to us could benefit and could contribute towards utilizing the rivers better and more sustainably.
So just take us through, though, with regard to Nairobi River, because that's what you've mentioned, and of course we are in the county of Nairobi. Why does it need to be restored for the betterment of the county and the people as well?
If properly utilized, properly maintained, and properly planned for and around, they could contribute immensely to the value of this city. And when I say value, I'm not just talking about the environmental value, I'm also talking about the economic potential value of the city.
And right now, what's the situation? I mean, we are obviously doing badly.
We're doing badly.
I mean, all the disasters that have been happening in the recent past have been happening around the riparian areas, and yet these could be the most beautiful, most valuable pieces of real estate.
And I see over here as well, this is Nairobi River as it could be.
Correct.
And here's perhaps, is this also an image of what Nairobi River could be?
That's an image of what Nairobi River could be. And what I'd like to highlight is that, you see, we've not shown the river as a river on its own, we've shown real estate around it. Yeah. And the message that we've been pushing out there as planning is that we could responsibly plan how to utilize the rivers. We're not saying that buildings shouldn't be built close to the river. In fact, we're saying that if properly planned and properly thought out, these could be some of the most attractive places to have commercial development, to have social development, to have parks, to have all the beautiful spaces you could imagine for the city. But I'd like to say that we've also been advocating for this as a way of refocusing redevelopment of the city. Because looking at the rivers also gives us lots of other opportunities to create economic value for the city. We've been working with various stakeholders. One of our biggest supporters has actually been the United Nations Environmental Programme, who've been working with us on supporting this initiative. We've also been working with the Nairobi County. And one of the most notable wins for us, I believe, is the fact that the Nairobi River restoration has now been included into the Nairobi new master plan. Right. The trick, of course, is going to be the execution of this.
So by restoring Nairobi River, it's going to change people's lives. Talk more about that.
Absolutely. In fact, I want to just draw your attention to this project here, which we're actually looking at on the northern end of the CBD. That is between Kijabe Street and Kipande Road.
Right. And this is, of course,
that's the Globe Cinema roundabout.
And that's Kipande Road.
That's Kipande Road there, and Kijabe Street through there. Mm-hmm. This is a project we've been working on now for the last 10 years. And the main driver of this project is actually the kiosk development on the northern bank. Okay. And our view on this is that we could bring in a lot of that informal sector trade that happens in the city, the hawkers, the people who work in Gikomba, and formally capture them in very attractive riverfront developments that are set in sensitively within these areas that I'm referring to. And, you know, think about that. That's already making a difference economically for that population there. And utilizing these people as guardians of the riparian, because they would want people to come here.
Yeah, so you talk about putting these, for example, kiosks in, but you use the word sensitively. Correct. How important is that? Because if somebody looks at this, surely this is still sort of a riparian land. So how is this different from what we already have when we see buildings close by to rivers, or structures and informal settlements or kiosks next to rivers? How is this different?
Well, it's different in the sense that in our thinking, the first place you start by addressing the planning issue is the river itself. Okay. In fact, in this particular area, what we've done is we've proposed to widen the river and create a series of weirs or dams to slow down the river and increase the water mass there. At this point here, the river is just about 2 meters wide. Right. But again, as I said, if one sensitively plans and utilizes the resource, you can create a very attractive waterfront situation. You could engineer the edges of the waterfront without necessarily having to build any concrete works, but make it environmentally sensitive and still plan buildings around it.
Okay.
So that it becomes an attractive space.
But then what's it going to take to do this? Why hasn't it happened already? Is it going to cost a lot of money, or do you need even more support? What's it going to take?
It's taken us a lot of time, largely because of the effort that we've been putting through to lobbying this concept and idea with the city. I think we're making progress, and I'd like to say this in the sense that the public and private sector players that we've been talking to about this have been very, very positive about this. Now we're getting into that stage where we're doing the detailed master planning and engineering studies to develop the solutions that will deliver this product. Right. So that's why it's taken us long, but it's achievable. It's been done in other parts of the world, in other big cities in the world. Nairobi shouldn't be a unique place where our rivers look like that and we have buildings collapsing everywhere, whereas we could have very attractive waterfront spaces, it's achievable.
And how long would it take to achieve something like this?
Well, we think that to achieve a product like this for the city shouldn't take us more than 5 to 6 years.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the Nairobi rivers are not that badly polluted as compared to other rivers in other parts of the world.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. And we believe that a lot of the challenges in terms of pollution with the rivers can be addressed through legislation.
I noticed something else on that side of the room. If we could just have a look, because it looks rather interesting, but what is this?
Well, this is a section of the Ngong River,
Okay.
which is actually the most polluted of the Nairobi River system.
Really?
Yes. I mean, you probably remember there was a disaster the other day about the Embakasi pipeline slum area, where a lot of people lost their lives because there was a pipe leak and people got burnt in the ensuing fire. So it's that area of downtown Nairobi. And what a lot of people don't know is that there are many of the old Nairobi quarries that were dug back in the 20s, 30s that have built most of Nairobi are located in this area here. Now, a lot of those disused quarries are next to the Ngong River, and they're currently being used as dump sites. So our proposal on this is that we could integrate the Ngong River with these quarries and use the quarries as part of the cleaning mechanism or cleaning engineering solution for the Ngong River, and also utilize them as water reservoir storage. Now, by doing that, we could immediately open up a huge section of Eastlands into an attractive public park space.
So in terms of how people's lives would probably be transformed if rivers were restored, we're not only talking about the positive economic impact, for example, having kiosks at the riverside, but also things like their health, right? That would be better.
Absolutely. And health means, you don't have waste living next to you. You've got an attractive environment. You've got, beautiful spaces that the residents who live around here can use as parks, because that's also another problem that we have in this city, is that we don't have enough public spaces for people to enjoy. So they could be very, very attractive public spaces for the city.
Richer lives, and also a richer Nairobi,
Absolutely.
Right? In so many ways.
Absolutely.
When people look at Nairobi, they really do think that it's a county that is just getting covered in buildings. It's becoming a concrete jungle, yet it is supposed to be, the city under the sun. So essentially, whilst many people look at buildings as the problem, they are also the solution.
Buildings are the solution. And in fact, our policy and our principle here is that planning or master planning or proper land use planning should be used to create sustainable communities and not the other way around. There's a certain notion in the city, particularly with developers now, who feel that there's a need to develop each and every inch of space because land is expensive and valuable. But it actually works the other way around. If you've got better planned spaces and you utilize the opportunities of riparian spaces for green space and planning, you actually create more value to that asset. You create more value to the investment that you have. So you don't need to crowd to make money. All you need to do is create good value, create good neighborhoods, and people will come, and your investments will thrive. So it's a mentality that I hope Kenyans can very quickly begin to think about and look to, that we don't have to destroy things. We don't have to utilize our resources improperly in order to make economic gain. In fact, if we utilize them properly, we stand to benefit a lot more.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
All the best.
It is time for our wild pick. You've sent in some photos that demonstrate that you care for the environment, nature and wildlife. Here are some of those photos. Jean Gishuhi sent in this photo of him and some friends taken at Mount Kasagao. They were hiking and heard about it from friends and wanted to visit. This is a photo of Natasha and Jessica Kahura at the old ivory burning site. They were standing on the ashes of the destroyed elephant tusks burned by former President Moi. Why? Because their father promised to take them on a trip to the national park to see the ashes. Then there's Clinton Kariuki and his friend Phoebe. This photo was taken at the Kitale National Museum. They were on a nature walk and it was their way of winding down the year and refreshing themselves. Soline Stevens sent in a photo taken at Hala Park in Mombasa. She was walking the nature trail and spending time with her husband because they love wildlife, and Hala Park is where her husband proposed. Lucy Ndegwa sent in a photo taken at the Cabernet viewpoint en route to Kerio Valley. She was spreading the message that ivory belongs to elephants and says it's always great bonding with nature. Well, if you want your photo showcased on Wild Pic, all you need to do is send in a picture of yourself doing something that shows you take an interest in the environment. Just like our NTV Wild Facebook page and send a photo via private message. But remember, you must include your full name, tell us where the photo was taken, what you were doing and why. So get out there and get clicking, and your photo could feature in our next show. So from the environmentalist to the governor of Nairobi to the architect, now you know the importance of riparian lands and what needs to be done to conserve them. That's it on NTV Wild Talk with me, Smriti Vidyarthi. Thanks very much for watching. See you again Tuesday, 10 p.m.